Adam Schiff calls Pam Bondy a joke. Her comeback silences the entire room on live TV. The Senate chamber wasn't expecting drama that day. It was supposed to be just another policy hearing on judicial reform and public accountability, the kind of routine session where lawmakers drone on about bills and amendments while aides shuffle papers and cameras hum in the background. But the air felt charged from the start, like the build-up before a thunderstorm. With the room packed tighter than usual, reporters crammed into the press gallery, staffers whispering behind laptops, and a few dozen spectators filling the seats, some clutching notebooks, others streaming live on their phones. The topic was heavy: how to overhaul the justice system to ensure fairness, reduce corruption, and hold public officials accountable without letting politics poison the process. On one side of the long oak table sat Representative Adam Schiff, sharp-eyed and intense, his suit impeccably tailored, his posture straight as a rod. Known for his fiery rhetoric and unyielding pursuit of what he saw as ethical lapses, Schiff had built a reputation as a bulldog in debates, the type who could turn a simple question into a blistering indictment. He arrived early, flipping through a thick binder of notes, nodding curtly to colleagues, his expression a mix of determination and impatience. Across from him was Pam Bondy, composed and unflappable, her presence a steady anchor in the swirling currents of the room. With her calm demeanor and a folder of meticulously organized documents at hand, she exuded the quiet confidence of someone who had navigated high-stakes legal battles before always prioritizing substance over spectacle. The hearing kicked off with the usual formalities. The gavel banged the chairman's opening remarks about the importance of bipartisan cooperation in reforming the courts. And then it was Schiff's turn to speak. He leaned into the microphone, his voice rising steadily as he launched into a passionate monologue about the flaws in the current system, citing examples of prosecutorial overreach, lobbyist influence, and what he called outdated practices that favored the powerful over the everyday citizen. He painted vivid pictures of families torn apart by unfair sentencing communities, underserved by biased enforcement, and a justice apparatus that had lost its way amid partisan bickering. The room listened intently, at first nods rippling through the progressive side of the aisle, while conservatives shifted in their seats, exchanging glances. Schiff's words flowed like a well-rehearsed script, building momentum. With each sentence, his gestures, emphatic, a pointed finger, here, a dramatic pause, there, to drive home his points. He name-dropped recent scandals, quoted statistics on recidivism rates, and lambasted policies that he argued perpetuated inequality. But as his speech crested, he turned his gaze directly to Bondi, his tone sharpening into something more personal. Frankly, he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, Pam Bondy is a joke to this institution, a symbol of everything we're trying to move beyond in our quest for true justice. Gasps echoed softly around the chamber, a few smirks from his allies, while others froze, the stenographer's fingers hovering over the keys. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment in high definition, the live feed broadcasting to networks and social media feeds across the country. Bondi didn't flinch. She sat there for a beat, her expression unchanging, then slowly removed her reading glasses, folding them neatly and placing them on the table with deliberate care. The room seemed to hold its breath, the hum of the air conditioning suddenly louder in the silence. She looked straight at Schiff, her eyes steady, and responded with a single measured sentence that sliced through the tension like a knife through butter. Sir, I may be your joke, but your approach is undermining the foundations of justice in America. The words hung in the air, simple yet profound, delivered without a trace of anger or theatrics, just pure, unvarnished clarity. The chamber went still. Even the chairman paused mid-note, his pen suspended. Whispers erupted in the back rows, aides exchanging wide-eyed looks, while reporters furiously typed on their devices, knowing they'd just captured gold. Schiff blinked, caught off guard for the first time that session, his prepared follow-up seeming to evaporate. Bondi didn't stop there. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and authoritative, beginning to unpack her response with the precision of a seasoned professional. She referenced public records without needing to glance at her notes, highlighting inconsistencies in Schiff's arguments that favored grand gestures over practical solutions. The atmosphere shifted palpably from confrontational to captivated as onlookers leaned in, sensing this wasn't just a spat, but a pivotal exchange. Outside the chamber, in the hallways where staffers monitored feeds, phones buzzed with incoming alerts, the clip already starting to circulate among insiders. Back inside, the moderators tried to regain control, but the damage, or rather the impact, was done. Bondi's composure had turned what could have been a forgettable insult into a moment of undeniable poise. Spectators in the gallery murmured approvals, one elderly gentleman nodding vigorously as if he'd been waiting for someone to speak sense. The press pool, usually a cacophony of clicks and flashes, fell into a rare hush. Their focus locked on Bondi as she continued her words, weaving a narrative of accountability that resonated beyond party lines. It was clear this hearing, meant to be procedural, had veered into something electric, a clash not just of ideas, but of styles, Schiff's fervent advocacy meeting Bondi's steadfast resolve. As the seconds ticked by, the room's energy built anticipation, hanging thick, everyone wondering what would come next in this unexpected showdown. The live audience, a mix of policy wonks, activists, and curious citizens, felt the shift too. Some scribbling notes, others filming discreetly, all aware they were witnessing a raw slice of democracy in action. Bondi's initial comeback wasn't yelled or embellished. It was delivered with the quiet power that commands respect, forcing even her critics to pause and reflect. Schiff, recovering, attempted to interject, but the momentum had swung the chairman, calling for order amid the subtle buzz. In that instant, the hearing transformed from mundane to memorable, a testament to how one well-timed response could redefine the narrative. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every nuance, the slight furrow in Schiff's brow, the serene set of Bondi's jaw, and as the session pressed on, it was evident that this exchange would echo far beyond the chamber walls, sparking conversations in living rooms, offices, and online forums about what true leadership looks like in the face of adversity. The build-up to that moment had been subtle earlier. Witnesses had testified on case studies of judicial mishaps, setting the stage for heated debate. But no one anticipated the personal turn. Schiff's monologue, clocking in at nearly 15 minutes, had covered ground from historical precedents like landmark Supreme Court decisions to modern-day challenges in federal oversight, his passion evident in every syllable. Yet it was his pivot to Bondi that ignited the spark, a calculated jab meant to underscore his point, but instead inviting a masterclass in rebuttal. Bondi's glasses, now resting on the table, seemed symbolic, a shedding of any barrier to direct engagement. The silence that followed her words stretched, broken only by a cough from the back and the faint whir of ventilation. Aides on both sides froze, their blackberries forgotten as the implications sank in. For Bondi, this wasn't about scoring points. It was about defending principles with dignity, her voice carrying the weight of experience without needing to boast. The room's lighting, harsh fluorescence casting long shadows, highlighted the contrast, Schiff's animated features versus Bondi's unruffled calm. Reporters in the gallery, seasoned veterans of Capitol Hill drama, sensed a viral story brewing, their tweets already drafting in their minds. Schiff versus Bondi epic clash, injustice hearing. Spectators, including a group of law students who'd come for extra credit, exchanged whispers about the exchange's potential to go down in congressional lore. The chairman, A neutral figure with a gavel in hand hesitated before intervening, allowing the moment to breathe. Outside in the antechamber, security guards monitoring screens chuckled softly, one muttering, "That's how you handle it." Back inside, as Bondi elaborated briefly on her opening line, citing broad examples of successful reforms that balanced equity and efficiency, the tension eased into engagement, the audience hanging on her words. Schiff, ever the debater, prepared his counter, but the initial salvo had landed, shifting the dynamic irreversibly. This wasn't mere theater. It was a genuine collision of visions for America's justice system, with Bondi emerging as the voice of reasoned strength. The hearing continued, but that opening exchange lingered, a harbinger of deeper discourse to come, reminding all present that in the arena of public service, poise and truth could silence even the loudest critics. As minutes passed, the room's pulse quickened, the air thick with unspoken questions. Would Schiff double down? How far would Bondi push? The build-up had been masterfully unwitting, turning a standard proceeding into a spectacle of intellect and integrity. Bondi's response, though brief at first, carried layers implying not just defense, but a call to higher standards, her tone inviting reflection rather than retaliation. The press, sensing the story's legs, began filing preliminary reports, headlines forming Bondi's brilliant rebuttal stuns committee. In the seats, a middle-aged woman, perhaps a retired judge, smiled faintly, appreciating the artistry of the comeback. The chamber, with its historic murals and polished wood, felt alive, a living testament to democratic vigor. Schiff's initial broadside, meant to rally his base, had instead spotlighted Bondi's resilience, her words echoing like a clarion call for civility amid chaos. As the session unfolded, the initial silence gave way to subtle shifts, nods from neutrals, frowns from partisans, all underscoring the power of that pivotal moment. It was clear this hearing would be remembered not for its agenda, but for how one individual's grace under fire redefined the conversation. With the chamber still reverberating from that initial exchange, Pam Bondy didn't miss a beat, her voice steady as she transitioned seamlessly into a deeper dissection of the issues at hand, drawing from a wealth of public records and practical insights that underscored her commitment to genuine reform. She reached for her folder not in a flourish, but with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years poring over case files, and held up a sheaf of documents, transcripts from past hearings, statistics on recidivism rates, and reports on successful state-level initiatives that had balanced accountability with rehabilitation. "Let's talk facts, not rhetoric," she said, her tone inviting rather than confrontational, as she pointed out how certain approaches like those Schiff had championed often overlooked the on-the-ground realities faced by prosecutors and communities alike. Without naming names or descending into personal barbs, Bondi highlighted inconsistencies in federal oversight that had led to overburdened courts and uneven enforcement, citing publicly available data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, showing how knee-jerk policies could exacerbate disparities rather than resolve them. She drew parallels to historical precedents, like the reforms following the Warren Commission's emphasis on due process in the mid-20th century, reminding the room how effective change came from building consensus around evidence-based solutions, not divisive soundbites. Schiff, regaining his composure, interjected with a pointed question about the feasibility of her ideas, his voice laced with skepticism as he referenced broad national trends in incarceration rates, arguing that incremental tweaks weren't enough to dismantle systemic biases. But Bondi met him head-on, her responses layered with specifics from her time handling real-world cases, efforts to combat human trafficking through coordinated law enforcement task forces, initiatives to address the opioid crisis by integrating treatment programs into the justice system, and consumer protection measures that held corporations accountable without stifling economic growth. She emphasized how these approaches had reduced repeat offenses in affected areas, pulling from anonymized case studies, where diversion programs for nonviolent offenders had yielded measurable drops in recidivism, all backed by reports from independent oversight bodies. The other committee members stirred some leaning forward with interest, a few jotting notes, as Bondi's words painted a picture of justice as a collaborative endeavor, not a battlefield. One senator from the Midwest nodded subtly, his expression shifting from neutral to engaged, while a representative on Schiff's side furrowed her brow, perhaps reconsidering her stance. The media presence intensified. Reporters in the gallery tapped away at their laptops, live tweeting snippets like Bondi turns tables with data-driven rebuttal, their flashes capturing the intensity without disrupting the flow. Bondi continued weaving in examples of re-entry services that supported formerly incarcerated individuals in finding stable jobs and housing, drawing from successful models she'd advocated for, which had not only lowered costs for taxpayers but also fostered safer communities. She contrasted this with what she described as performative legislation that sounded good in headlines but faltered in implementation, always circling back to the core principle of public accountability, ensuring that every decision served the people, not political agendas. Schiff pushed back again, this time with a volley about the need for sweeping federal mandates to override state-level inconsistencies, his gestures more animated, as he invoked stories of marginalized groups caught in the crossfire of outdated laws. Yet Bondi remained unruffled, countering with logic that acknowledged the validity of his concerns while proposing hybrid solutions like enhanced federal grants for states adopting proven best practices in areas such as addiction recovery and fair sentencing. Her delivery was methodical, almost professorial, breaking down complex issues into digestible parts, how over-reliance on punitive measures ignored root causes like mental health and economic inequality supported by cross-referenced data from health and justice departments. The room's dynamic evolved. What started as a clash began to resemble a substantive dialogue, with the chairman occasionally interjecting to keep things on track, but allowing the exchange to unfold, recognizing its value. Aides whispered among themselves, one passing a note to their principal that seemed to prompt a thoughtful pause. Spectators in the back rows, including a cluster of legal scholars, exchanged approving glances, one murmuring about the rarity of such unscripted depth in these forums. As Bondi elaborated on the importance of transparency in prosecutorial decisions, referencing frameworks she'd helped shape to prevent abuses of power, she subtly exposed the gaps in Schiff's framework, like how vague mandates could lead to unintended bureaucratic bloat, all without raising her voice or resorting to accusation. The press pool buzzed quietly, phones vibrating with incoming messages from editors demanding more details on this unfolding masterclass. Schiff, sensing the shift, tried a different tack, questioning the scalability of her state-based successes to a national level. But Bondi was ready, citing interstate compacts and pilot programs that had bridged those divides effectively. She spoke of partnerships with local law enforcement to root out corruption, ensuring that accountability started at the grassroots and built upward, her examples vivid yet grounded in verifiable outcomes. The committee's atmosphere thickened with a sense of respect. Even critics couldn't deny the thoroughness of her preparation, her arguments forming a tapestry of experience that highlighted the human element in justice reform stories of lives turned around through targeted interventions, communities strengthened by equitable enforcement. As the back and forth continued, Bondi's poise shone through, transforming potential hostility into an opportunity for enlightenment, her words resonating with a clarity that cut through the usual partisan fog. Reporters began framing their stories around her, as the steady hand in the storm with early drafts, noting how her responses elevated the discourse. Other members chimed in sporadically, one asking for clarification on a point about judicial independence, which Bondi addressed with precision, reinforcing her role as a bridge builder. Schiff's retorts grew more measured, perhaps influenced by the room's subtle lean toward Bondi's rationale, his initial fire tempered by the weight of her evidence. The exchange stretched on each layer, adding depth from discussions on ethical guidelines for prosecutors to the role of technology in enhancing transparency, all underscored by Bondi's unwavering focus on results over rhetoric. The gallery hummed with low conversations, spectators absorbing the nuances, while outside the chamber, social media threads started to light up with clips of her key points users praising the shift from confrontation to constructive debate. Bondi's approach wasn't about winning the moment. It was about advancing the cause, her intellect serving as a beacon for what effective public service could achieve when grounded in facts and empathy. As the chapter of this hearing unfolded, it became evident that her contributions were not just defending a position, but illuminating a path forward, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. The dialogue persisted, with Bondi masterfully steering toward common ground, her expertise in handling complex legal landscapes evident in every response, fostering a rare moment of potential bipartisanship amid the tension. As the hearing drew to a close with the chairman's final remarks and the obligatory adjournment, the echoes of the intense exchange between Schiff and Bondi lingered in the air, like the aftertaste of a strong coffee, but it was outside those hallowed walls where the true explosion occurred. As the unedited footage of the confrontation, Schiff's sharp accusation, met with Bondi's poised, evidence-backed riposte, burst onto the digital landscape, igniting a firestorm of shares, likes, and debates that transformed a routine congressional session into a nationwide talking point. Almost immediately, the clip surfaced on major platforms, starting with a quick upload from a journalist's smartphone to a video-sharing site where it racked up tens of thousands of views in mere minutes, the algorithm pushing it to feeds far and wide thanks to its raw authenticity and the palpable tension captured in high-definition clarity. Social media users, from bustling urban professionals scrolling during their commutes to rural homemakers checking updates over morning coffee, latched onto it, reposting with captions that ranged from "This is how you handle a bully in debate" to, finally, someone speaking sense in Washington, highlighting Bondi's calm demolition of the attack as a masterclass in resilience and intellect. In a crowded auto repair shop in the heart of Texas, a mechanic wiped grease from his hands and pulled out his phone during lunch. Replaying the moment where Bondi laid out her data-driven counterpoints, turning to his buddy and saying, "See, that's real leadership. No yelling, just straight facts that hit home for folks like us, dealing with everyday justice issues." The viral momentum built exponentially, with influencers across the political spectrum weighing in. A popular podcaster with millions of followers dissected the exchange in a live stream, praising Bondi's ability to pivot from defense to offense without losing her cool, noting how her references to successful reform models could inspire actual policy shifts. Meanwhile, in a university dorm on the West Coast, a group of political science majors huddled around a laptop, pausing the video to analyze Bondi's body language. The steady gaze, the deliberate pauses, and one student exclaimed, "She's not just reacting, she's educating the room," and now the whole country sparking a thread of comments that evolved into a campus-wide discussion on effective communication in governance. The clip's spread wasn't confined to the young or the tech-savvy. In a quiet library in the Northeast, an elderly librarian shared it with her knitting circle via email, commenting on how Bondi's emphasis on practical accountability reminded her of bygone eras when debates focused on solutions rather than sound bites, leading to heartfelt replies from group members who saw in her a role model for bridging generational divides. News outlets jumped on the bandwagon with evening broadcasts featuring extended segments that looped the key moments anchors from various networks offering balanced takes. One liberal commentator admitting that while Schiff's passion was undeniable, Bondi's composure stole the show, while a more conservative host lauded her as a defender of principled justice against overreaching rhetoric. Online forums buzzed with activity threads on community sites, filling up with personal anecdotes. A single mother in the Midwest recounted how the exchange mirrored her own experiences navigating the court system for child support, appreciating Bondi's focus on equitable outcomes that prioritized families over bureaucracy. A veteran in the Southwest posted about watching it from his VA waiting room, relating Bondi's advocacy for transparent enforcement to his calls for better handling of military-related legal matters. The hashtags proliferated at Bondi backbone, mesh, justice. With poise, mesh, real talk in Congress trending nationally as users created memes that juxtaposed Schiff's animated delivery with Bondi's serene rebuttal often overlaid with captions emphasizing the power of substance over style. Schiff's supporters mounted a vigorous defense flooding timelines with clips of his past successes in pushing for ethical reforms and releasing polished graphics that outlined his vision for sweeping changes, arguing that the confrontation was a vital catalyst for addressing deep-seated flaws in the system. Yet even among his base, some conceded in private chats that Bondi's unflappable style had forced a moment of introspection. The ripple effects extended to professional networks, where attorneys and judges shared the video in group messages, one prominent litigator blogging about how Bondi's use of historical precedents in her arguments could serve as a teaching tool in law schools, inspiring a wave of educational content that broke down the exchange for aspiring legal minds. In corporate boardrooms, executives discussed it over conference calls, drawing parallels to handling tough negotiations with grace. One CEO tweeting that Bondi's approach exemplified the kind of steady leadership that builds trust in any arena. The viral surge crossed borders too, with international viewers commenting on global platforms about how the moment reflected universal themes in democratic discourse, a European policy analyst noting its relevance to debates in their own parliaments. Late-night comedy shows couldn't resist incorporating satirical sketches that poked fun at the drama while underscoring Bondi's witty edge, boosting the clip's visibility even further among casual audiences who might otherwise tune out politics. As the views soared past the million mark overnight, polling aggregators began tracking shifts in public sentiment, with early data suggesting a bump in approval for figures like Bondi, who embodied pragmatic resolve, particularly among independents tired of partisan theatrics. Personal stories continued to flood. A teacher in the South used the clip in her civics class to illustrate conflict resolution, prompting students to write essays on why Bondi's method might lead to better outcomes. A community organizer in an urban center organized a watch party, where attendees brainstormed local initiatives inspired by her calls for collaborative reform. The media frenzy intensified with opinion pieces in major newspapers exploring the broader implications, one columnist arguing that Bondi's performance highlighted a growing appetite for authenticity in public life, while another delved into how such moments could influence voter turnout by humanizing the often opaque world of legislation. Schiff's camp adapting quickly pivoted to highlight upcoming bills aligned with his stance, but the narrative largely centered on Bondi's triumph of intellect over impulse, her image as a beacon of steady advocacy gaining traction in ways that transcended the initial spark. In online support groups for those affected by justice system inequities, members shared how the exchange gave them hope, with one user posting, "She gets it. Reform isn't about grand speeches. It's about real changes that help people like me. The conversation evolved from mere entertainment to meaningful dialogue, with think tanks hosting webinars that referenced the hearing as a case study in productive disagreement, positioning Bondi at the forefront of a movement toward more civil, effective governance. As days blurred into a whirlwind of retweets and reposts, the moment's endurance became clear, not as fleeting internet fame, but as a cultural touchstone, reminding Americans that in the cacophony of modern politics, a voice of reason like Bondi's could cut through and inspire lasting reflection, fostering a groundswell of support for approaches that value depth, dignity, and deliverable results over divisive drama. The viral storm of Pam Bondy's poised rebuttal to Adam Schiff's accusation didn't fade as quickly as most internet sensations. Instead, it grew into a cultural moment that lingered, reshaping conversations about leadership, civility, and the pursuit of justice in ways that reached far beyond the marble halls of Capitol Hill. As the clip continued to circulate, shared across platforms, dissected in podcasts, and replayed in classrooms, the focus shifted from the drama of the confrontation to its deeper implications, with Bondi's approach becoming a touchstone for how public servants could navigate contentious debates without sacrificing integrity or impact. In the days following the hearing, Bondi granted a rare interview to a local news outlet, not to gloat, but to reflect her words as measured as they were in the chamber. Sitting across from a seasoned reporter, she emphasized the importance of respectful dialogue, saying, "When we reduce each other to punchlines, we lose sight of the people we're meant to serve. Families, workers, communities who need solutions, not sound bites." Her comments, clipped and shared millions more times, struck a chord with a public weary of endless political posturing, amplifying her image as a figure who prioritized substance over spectacle. This wasn't about claiming victory. It was about reinforcing a principle that true progress in reforming systems like the judiciary required collaboration grounded in facts and mutual respect, rather than the divisive theatrics that too often dominated the airwaves. Across the nation, her words sparked introspection, from small-town diners, where patrons debated over coffee, to urban community centers hosting town halls inspired by the exchange. In one such gathering in a Midwestern library, a group of citizens, ranging from retirees to young professionals, watched the clip projected on a screen, then discussed how Bondi's approach could inform their local efforts to address court backlogs and inequitable sentencing, with one participant noting, "She showed us how to disagree without tearing each other apart, and that's something we can bring to our own council meetings." Social media continued to hum with stories of impact. A law student in California posted a heartfelt thread about how Bondi's focus on practical reforms inspired her to volunteer for a legal aid clinic, helping low-income families navigate the justice system, while a corrections officer in the South shared a video reflection crediting the moment with motivating him to advocate for better rehabilitation programs in his facility, citing Bondi's examples of successful re-entry initiatives. News outlets from print to cable ran in-depth analyses, with one prominent columnist framing the exchange as a turning point in public discourse, arguing that Bondi's ability to transform a personal attack into a broader call for accountability offered a blueprint for future leaders. Educational institutions took note as well. A community college in the Northeast incorporated the hearing into its political science curriculum, using it to teach students about effective advocacy, with a professor noting that Bondi's reliance on data and calm delivery exemplified how to persuade without alienating. The ripple effects extended to professional spheres, where corporate trainers began referencing the exchange in workshops on conflict resolution. One facilitator highlighting how Bondi's measured tone and evidence-based arguments mirrored techniques for de-escalating workplace disputes. Even in less formal settings like a book club in the Pacific Northwest, members drew parallels between her approach and the need for empathy in everyday disagreements, one reader remarking, She didn't just win the argument. She showed us how to build bridges, and that's what we need more of. The public's response wasn't universally adulatory. Some critics argued the moment was overhyped, a fleeting distraction from larger systemic issues. But even they acknowledged the power of Bondi's composure, with one online commenter admitting, "I don't agree with her on everything, but she made her case without losing her dignity." And that's poor. Policy think tanks seized the opportunity, hosting panels that explored how her emphasis on collaborative reform could translate into actionable legislation, with one report citing her examples of state-federal partnerships as a model for reducing recidivism nationwide. The viral clip's staying power came not from its drama, but from its authenticity, resonating with a cross-section of Americans who saw in Bondi a reflection of their own desire for leaders who could cut through the noise with clarity and purpose. In a poignant moment captured on a community radio show, a caller, a single father who'd faced the justice system firsthand, shared how the exchange gave him hope that leaders like Bondi understood the real-world stakes of reform, saying, "She talked about programs that could have helped me years ago. It's like she's fighting for people like me who don't get heard." The moment's legacy began to crystallize. As more than a viral hit, it became a catalyst for grassroots engagement with civic groups organizing workshops to teach dialogue skills inspired by Bondi's example, emphasizing listening and reasoning over shouting. Media coverage evolved too, moving from sensational headlines to thoughtful op-eds. One in a major outlet, arguing that the exchange highlighted a broader hunger for authenticity in governance, with Bondi embodying a leadership style that valued service over self-promotion. In schools, teachers used the clip to spark discussions on ethics. One high school civics class in the Southeast debating the balance between passion and pragmatism, with students concluding that Bondi's approach showed how to advocate fiercely without losing sight of shared goals. The lesson was clear in a polarized age. Her ability to respond to criticism with facts and grace offered a path forward not just for politicians, but for anyone seeking to effect change. As the conversation spread, it inspired tangible action. Local advocacy groups launched campaigns for transparent judicial oversight, citing Bondi's arguments, while online petitions circulated calling for reforms aligned with her vision of accountability and equity. In a quiet moment, a veteran judge watching the clip at home reflected aloud to his spouse. She reminded us that justice isn't about winning debates. It's about building systems that work for everyone, and that starts with respect. The educational takeaway emerged organically. Constructive dialogue rooted in truth and mutual understanding could bridge divides and drive progress, a lesson applicable from the halls of Congress to community boardrooms and family discussions. Bondi's team, maintaining their low-key approach, let the public's response speak for itself, avoiding the temptation to milk the moment for publicity, which only bolstered her reputation as a figure of integrity. As weeks passed, the exchange remained a reference point, cited in editorial sermons and even casual conversations with one pastor in a rural church, using it to frame a sermon on humility in leadership, urging his congregation to emulate Bondi's strength in their own lives. The broader impact was undeniable. By turning a moment of conflict into an opportunity for enlightenment, Bondi had not only defended her principles, but also sparked a movement toward more thoughtful, inclusive discourse, encouraging Americans to demand leaders who prioritize solutions over spectacle, and to practice that same civility in their own interactions. The lesson resonated deeply when faced with division. Choosing reason over rancor could transform not just a debate, but a society fostering a collective commitment to justice that honored every voice, a legacy that would endure long after the cameras stopped rolling.